everything. So we're at the top of the hour. I want to welcome everybody to this call. Thank you so much for investing your time this evening to spend learning from Yarrow Willard. He's a second-generation herbalist. You may have heard of his father, Dr. Terry Willard, the founder and director of the Wild Rose College of Natural Healing, of which Yarrow has taken that on. And that's his second project to having started, created, and built Harmonic Arts Botanical Dispensary, and an absolute wealth of wisdom. Not only that, just a great, fun guy. And I'm looking forward to everything that you're going to be sharing tonight to help build our immunity and our resilience. Really excited to have you on the call and everybody that's joining in. This will be recorded. We'll send it out to you afterwards. I know Yarrow has a little PowerPoint presentation. He's going to kind of walk us through. We're going to leave some space for questions. So some of you have already popped some questions into the chat. Feel free to do that at any time. You know, if something kind of comes up, you're like, oh, I really wanted to ask Yarrow this. Type it in at the end. We'll kind of review everything that's been posted. You can also post questions when we get to that section as well of the evening. But I want to respect everybody's time. I want to respect Yarrow's time. We're 7:02. We're just going to jump right in, and I'm going to pass this over to Yarrow so that he can do kind of the screen share and yeah.
Awesome.
Take it over. So I've got...
Well, welcome everybody. I really appreciate your time. Like Malcolm said, I feel time is our most valuable resource. And so for you to spend the time tonight to kind of tune into this immunologically potent message and really start to build some strategies, as Malcolm sort of preambled about, like, this is the time of year where we start to get sick, where the seasons are changing. Our defensive qi, sort of from a Chinese medicine perspective, we'll call it wei qi, which is our defensive qi, gets interrupted by evil wind and cold season, right? So this is the time when the pathogens kind of come out to play. And also because of the back to school, back to work, whatever that might be, your seasonal transition, it's when we're most susceptible, when we're stressed. So we're going to talk tonight a bit about some of the things we can do from a holistic perspective as well as a botanical perspective. So how can we, from a whole macro lifestyle perspective, really be more immunologically savvy and have better strategy around that as we move into these seasons? And then also what type of botanicals and mushrooms and these types of things can we use to start to work with? So first off, before we get going, I know the chat's working because I see people using it, but I would love to hear what you guys are drinking. Or is there a strategy, a tea, or a mead, or a beverage, or just water, or maybe it's maybe you turn water into wine? What are you drinking tonight? I'll start by saying I made myself a nice adaptogen latte today. I felt as though the seasonal shift, it rained here. So it's really that season where things start to shift. And I was thinking, you know, adaptogens are my key go-to before I'm sick as kind of that deep level support. So I'm drinking Astragalus, ashwagandha, holy basil, reishi, schizandra, hishu wu, our adapt tea, but I've also added a little bit of shilajit in there and some chaga mushroom. So yeah, that's me. And it's one of my favorite things about this season is that I start to crave warm beverages again. In the summer, I'm like, nope, let's make mocktails and cocktails and fun bubbly drinks and just have a little more effervescent energy. But as the winter comes in, decoctions and broths and stews are really key. So it's not quite winter yet, but it is seasonal transition. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to look at the herbs, and we're going to look at a bunch of other things. So just as a little quick thing, if you have a question, I'm going to ask Malcolm to raise his hand like this. Can you do that, Malcolm? And Malcolm's going to answer or ask the question for you if you ask it in the chat. So Malcolm, if you raise your hand, I will know it's time to come on in the reactions. You got that? Let me give a try. Yep. Okay. If Malcolm raises his hand, he's going to ask one of your questions. So don't hesitate to ask questions right away. And I'm looking in the chat and I'm seeing, yeah, people are drinking tea, golden milk, holy basil, filtered water with pine hydrosol. Nice. An adrenal elixir mix, magnesium, ginger lemon honey, turmeric lemonade. Yeah, you guys are on it. Nettle and oat straw. Jerry, that sounds really nourishing. A corn silk tea, Malcolm's chai mix. Uh-oh. Careful with that stuff. No, just kidding. I'm sure it's pretty darn good. Jasmine tea, ginger tea, elderberry chaga chai. Yum, man, you guys are dialed as far as already on the level with working with plant medicine. And I just want to give a big props out to the light seller for that. Malcolm and team have been educating people for, what is it, like, I'm going to say maybe 16, 17, 18 years now on how to work with plants, superfoods, nutrition. So your community is really dialed already into a lot of this stuff. So I just want to give a big shout out to the light seller being that watering hole for this kind of education. So if you haven't taken any classes there, if this is your first one, well, you know you're missing out. So please check out their calendar. I'm sure they've got lots of great stuff, both in person and online coming up. So big shout out, really premier education in Alberta for really working with this kind of medicine and starting to re-empower ourselves. This term health sovereignty gets thrown around a lot, but I would say that has been something that Malcolm and the light seller have really given people over the years, is an opportunity to build a bit more awareness around how to master their own health, and really be in control of that and take that back. So thank you, light seller, for everything that you guys do. Okay, I'm going to start with my PowerPoint. Little thumbs up if you see this. I'm pretty sure you do. Looks like it. All right. And I think Carol Baker, you've got your video on. So if you want to tune that off, that would be awesome. Otherwise, not the end of the world. So we'll start with talking about, really tonight, we're about herbs and mushrooms for resilience and immunity. This is a Harmonic Arts sponsored webinar. So my company has been making plant medicine since 2008. And we've really been about crafting botanical formulations that empower people to have better health. And so we do everything from teas to tinctures to mushrooms to all kinds of syrups and elixir powders, and you name it. You've probably seen our product around. We've now kind of found our way into the health food world all over Canada. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a quick story of ours. This is sort of how we like to start our webinars because it gives you a little understanding. This is my little family. We live here in the Comox Valley on the unceded territory of the Comox First Nations. We are of settler descent, so it is part of our duty in this part of the world to reconcile that and to really work in alignment both with the natural law of the universe, but also with the kind of unceded territory that is this part of the world, and the traditions that were here before us, really to honor them and to empower and embrace and bring them up. We've been crafting plant medicine, like I said, since 2008. And really, we work as a herbal company devoted to the best health for people and planet. We are now what we call B Corp certified. And if you haven't heard of B Corps, those are beneficial corps that really do, they're better corps, basically, that are using their business to be the change we want to see in the world. So we go through a whole process of auditing our vendors, of auditing our supply chain, of auditing our health and safety practices, making sure our team is paid well and given good health care and all of this kind of stuff. So this is part of our mission, is how do we be a company that is the change we want to see in the world? And so we've done this, as well as our 1% for the planet, giving back from every one of our blends to support our West Coast forests and protect them, as well as other forms of, I guess, social initiatives to support our local community and the ecosystem around it. We're mostly organic, and that's all I'll say about that. But let's talk about the immune system. So I think one thing that comes up with immunity is people forget that the immune system is a whole integrated system of the body. It's not one organ. It's not like the lungs are the immune system, right? It's not just the lymphatic system. The immune system incorporates places like the skin, right? Your skin is part of your immune system. Your bone marrow is part of your immune system. So when it comes to good immunity, we really need to understand that there is far more at play than just taking good herbs for the immune system. How is our elimination working? Do we have lymphatic congestion? Are we eating toxins? Are we building up things in our detox pathways? Are we having issues that way? How is besides just our lungs, how are our tonsils and All of these kind of lymphatic tissues are a big part of that. So I just wanted to bring this to light. The spleen is also a big part of the immune system. People are like, what's the spleen for? The spleen is this organ. Well, it happens to help filter the blood and work as an immune organ. So there's a lot more to the immune system. Most of our T lymphocytes and blood cells, our white blood cells, are produced in the bone marrow. So if we don't have healthy, strong bones, we might not have a healthy, strong immune system. This is one of the problems that comes along with a lot of the autoimmune conditions, is actually that there's issues in other parts of the body that are affecting the immune system's integrity and the immune system's ability to decipher whether something's a threat or not a threat. And so we see this quite a bit. Something else I would say is our skin. A lot of people forget that our skin is part of the immune system. And if we overly, I'll say, antibacterialize our skin, AKA do too many soaps and shampoos. I'm not saying don't wash, but know that the microbiome on your skin is actually part of that protective layer that protects you during the winter months. So something I would highly invite is that you do things like skin brushing, if you're going to do, and clean the skin that way versus always antibacterial soaps. So to me, this is a big part of it. I feel like there's a whole theory out there these days. It's called the holobiont, and it's a new theory around us being part of an ecosystem. And really how it goes is that we aren't actually a single human entity. The more we understand the microbiome, the more we understand the layers upon layers of different beings that live in and on us, the more we can understand that we become actually an ecosystem by nature. And in order to maintain proper health, it's all about feeding the ecosystem, not the human being, right? It's feeding the ecosystem, and the ecosystem takes care of the human. So this is something to be aware of. When people think of foreign invaders like bacteria, viruses, toxins, those aren't all bad. A little bit of toxin in our environment actually stimulates our immune system to work stronger. So, and same with viruses. One of the things that people don't realize, obviously, after all of the stuff that's gone around with COVID, we've had a lot bigger education into the virome and an understanding of what viruses are. Unfortunately, through that whole messaging, they were painted as all bad. A lot of viruses are actually quite good. I know it sounds weird, but bacteria and viruses have been at each other, keeping each other in check ever since the beginning of time. And viruses make up a huge amount of our DNA. Our actual evolution is evolved through having viral interaction. And if it wasn't for viral interaction, we probably wouldn't be able to protect our bodies from pathogenic bacteria. So just to be aware, all of it is an ecosystem. And this is something to be just continually front of mind, is that we are an ecosystem inside of another ecosystem, a micro inside of a macro ecosystem. And in order to build right relations with our outer world, we need to start with our inner world, which means all of our virome, bacteria, all that kind of thing. Anyway, I won't go too far into that. This isn't a class on that, but just know that there are lots of, I'll say, growing edge science showing the benefit of certain types of parasites and certain types of viruses and the different kinds of bacteria. You know, E. coli is not bad. It's just when it's out of check. And something that we've been doing as a human species is really fighting against this whole biome in general. And that's been causing a massive degradation to our immuno-integrity. So that's just what I would love to remind you of, that, it's time to kind of do a little bit of a 180. And we've been doing this for a while now around how we treat that microcosmos within us. And that's the only way I think we're ever going to fix the outer world. Okay, so let's just keep going. I wanted to bring this sort of top of mind also of deep immunity and surface immunity. These are two different aspects of the immune system. Something that I am a big believer in is that we actually, let me just see if I can, hold on. I'm going to put, sorry, I wanted to, I was going to take somebody off video because they're distracting me. That's okay. Deep immunity is really if you can imagine, the way I would give it as an analogy is think of the engineers. If you were a castle, the engineers that are building the moat and protecting the walls, those are your deep immune aspects. Your surface immunity would be your guards on the gate, right? At the edge of the castle. So we don't always want to work with surface immunity. We want to be working with deep immunity and surface immunity at different times. Our deep immune system happens to be more of that bone marrow, the deep lungs, the lymphatic system. And this is what happens is once an illness gets far enough into our immune system, it becomes more chronic and we get these year-long, deeper illnesses. We see that we can protect against deep infections, such as bronchitis is one, deeper, even some forms of SIBO and Candida, and those are actual immunointegrity issues, where the immunointegrity of the lining of the gut has been compromised, and now we're having pathogens come in with all the inflammation in the gut. So we want to look to our deep immune herbs, and we're going to talk about those things like the medicinal mushrooms, astragalus, adaptogens, like I'm drinking right now, because right now I'm not sick. I want to keep my health at the top as I can. I'm about to go on the road and do a bit more traveling, which means I'm going to have more stress on my body. My ecosystem is going to interface with new ecosystems and potentially new pathogens. So I'm going to work on my deep immune system right now before I get on the road so that I can actually have more adaptability. So I become the adaptogen that I'm wanting to consume. So that's where I'm at. Surface immunity really gets down into like I call them the 10,000 foot soldiers that line our gut. And those are our gut flora, all the way from our mouth and our nose, all the way in through our throat, down into our digestive tract, into the large intestine. These are all part of our surface immunity. Your stomach acid, ironically, is part of your immune system. It helps to kill pathogens as they come into your body. Your skin microbiome, right? Your mucous membranes in your lungs as they cough out catarrh. This is all part of surface immunity. We're using those membranes to protect things from getting into our body. Something that I love to bring to mind is that when you eat food, it doesn't actually go into your body. It goes into the hole in your donut. Same things when you breathe in, it doesn't actually go into your body. It goes into the hole in your lungs, right? The like inner but outer. It's not until it gets through those mucous membranes, past that microbiome, in through the skin or in through the mucous membranes of the gut lining, that it actually becomes part of your body. So all of those areas have a surface level defense in them to support you. We see surface immunity issues as seasonal, short-term illnesses. This can be coughs and colds, flus, these types of things, fevers, if they're on the surface. We want to, in this season, make sure that we have the right herbs on hand to protect against surface immune issues. If we don't, and we let them go on, and our body isn't able to protect us from surface immune, they become deeper immune issues. One of the problems that we see that's happened in a major way in the last, I guess, number of decades is the introduction of antibiotics. And at first this was a savior because it actually killed bacteria. But, you know, things like penicillin, 5 years later, 50% of the bacteria, or the staphylococcus that it was meant to kill, were immune to it. Bacteria rapidly reproduce and they build strategies to deal with antibiotics. So most of our antibiotic care has only wiped out good bacteria in the end and caused superbugs. Right now, one of the major leading causes of health issues and death in the States is actually superbugs due to antibiotic treatment over the last number of decades. It's one of the main causes of hospitalization. And so what we've actually created is a bigger monster due to fighting it in a non-holistic way, in a much more allopathic. Now, I'm not against the allopathic practice. I actually really appreciate, again, the amalgamation of both of these systems. And I think it's really important for us to honor that both systems have a really good place, but when it comes to really immune care, looking at it from a holistic lens gives us a much deeper perspective, a much broader way to really work with the immune system. So all of this is not about herbs. It's just about understanding immunointegrity and understanding the biome that we live in and the parts of the body that are affected. So anyway, we could look to herbal allies like Echinacea, Goldenseal, Uznia. These are some of the ones we're going to talk about tonight. So yeah, I'm going to just, I guess I'm moving on to the next slide. I'm trying to sort of set the stage before we talk about herbs. What are things you can do, right? Lifestyle habits are massively important for the immune system. So don't just think about these herbs as magic bullets. Oh, I'm getting sick, better take the Goldenseal, right? That's an A plus B equals C reaction that that equation doesn't necessarily always get us the right answer. We need to look at it from a much wider lens. Are we getting enough sleep? Are we tuning in with nature? Like when I get out into the forest, I'll tell you, all the fir trees in the winter, they release all kinds of pinene and terpenes and different essential oils that help my lungs breathe better and protect me from pathogens. So just getting out in nature actually protects our immune system in a big way. I find, one of the things I heard about in Russia, this is a tradition, was to wrap up babies when they're young into blankets and let them sleep outside to breathe in the cold air. And it helps to build and strengthen their immune system so they have stronger immunity as they age. I think this is really interesting. And there's some things we could learn about putting ourselves through a little bit more resilience and stress testing in order to strengthen our immune system, especially as we age, and especially when we're young. A lot of us have if we've grown up in cities, well, it's 70 degrees all the time inside. We get into a car, we then go to school or work. We don't spend enough time outside and actually feel into the seasons. One of my favorite things to do when I come to Calgary is to chew on the little juniper and pine tree needles at the airport. I know it sounds weird, but to just actually like tune into the ecosystem when I land, to allow the plants of that ecosystem to support me in the knowledge of how to show up in that ecosystem. So getting out in nature, I think, is really, really important, not just in nature, but being one with nature. Oh, be one with nature. Oh, be one with nature, Kenobi. Anyway, we'll leave it there. Antioxidant-rich diet. So those lingonberries that Malcolm was mentioning, anything with lots of color in it, other than candy, is usually full of antioxidants, and probably juices, not all of them. I see these days things like red berry drink. That is not juice. Maybe if you're going to go with like a black currant juice or like those Knudsen super awesome like juices, there are some that are full of antioxidants. But yeah, pigment in color in food is a big part of it. It's part of the reason we're attracted to those colors is actually because our body craves antioxidants. So make sure you're getting them in your diet, which means, and not all vegetables are treated equally or grown equally or full of antioxidants. So just because it's got red pigment and it's a tomato and it comes from Subway doesn't mean it has antioxidants. So yeah, make sure you choose wisely, an antioxidant rich diet. Move that body. I recommend, every hour or hour and a half, get up and move the body. If you're somebody who works at a desk, get up for a walk. There's something called an ultradian rhythm, which is a 90-minute rhythm. You only have 90 minutes to actually focus on any one task. And if you try to focus on something for more than 90 minutes, you're going to really lose your capacity to actually be effective. So every 90 minutes, if you are somebody who works at a desk, get up, move the body, shake it off, change it up, do some kind of exercise. I'm a big fan of short stints of physical. Remember how I mentioned the lymphatic system is part of the immune system? Well, one of the best ways to work on that is just to have a rebounder. Have a rebounder at home and bounce for like 5 minutes. It's amazing how fast that'll work. Or skip. Have a skipping rope. Do that. Go for a brisk walk. Move that immune system. If you have the ability to go for a swim, that's another great way to work with the lymphatic system. But just get up and move. I think in the winter, it's easy to get sedentary. Cross-country skiing, if you're Albertans, you got the best skiing there in Kananaskis country. So get out, do stuff. This will only support your immune system stronger. Now, of course, if people are unprotected, aka they go out and they don't have a scarf and they might get cold from not being in the ecosystem properly. So just make sure that you are doing your due diligence in wearing proper mitts and gloves and toques and all that stuff as it gets colder, but also allow yourself to be exposed a little bit to some less than ideal situations, aka doesn't always have to be 70 degrees all the time. Breathe that cold air whenever you can. This actually supports your immune system. Do a little bit of a seasonal cleanse and detox. Malcolm mentioned my father, Dr. Terry Willard. He created the Herbal Detox. Now, I know that's had some challenge around being in stock, but the concept is that every fall and spring, we do a little bit of a cleanse. So for me, I've been kind of tuning into either I do it in late September till right before Thanksgiving, or do between Thanksgiving and Halloween. Those are kind of my two fall times to do a cleanse. And in the spring, it's usually in March or April, but doing a little bit of a cleanse. Usually we start around April 1st, actually, to cleanse the eliminatory channels and get the body moving, to move out toxins. I would say this is one of the best strategies for longevity and for healthy immune system over the years, is to preempt that. It's sort of like when you take your car in for an oil change. You do that because otherwise you kill your car. Well, why don't we do this for ourselves more? Do a cleanse. So my invitation is sometime between now and the end of October to take 12 days to 14 days to really retrofit your diet and take some herbs and supplements that support elimination of toxins. So work with the liver, the kidneys, the colon, and maybe the blood as far as a cleansing. Eliminate all simple carbohydrates, all sugars, all flours, a lot of fermented foods, and anything that could turn into sugar. Get into more alkaline foods and do that for 10 to 12 days. It's amazing how effective just a short cleanse can be in building and strengthening our overall body integrity. So just like we wax on with the moon, we wax off. I would highly recommend seasonal cleansing. Also, try to avoid burnout. Now, I myself have totally suffered from burnout. I say it's a crime against wisdom because I realized that I was burning out and didn't do anything about it. When I was originally in running our company, was just going, thought I could do it all. And you know what? It wasn't until I started to really hire in some great team to support the larger company we were becoming that I actually realized I had a lot of burnout. And it took me a good year of recovery to just kind of like, wow, I had burned out from burning the candle too fast. I don't want to see that happen to you. I am now hyper aware of that. And I do strategies like my adaptogens in this season so that when I go on the road, I'm not going to burn out in that process. So I become much more aware of that, proactively do some other holistic practices, maybe get a massage once in a while, do some acupuncture, cleanse, clear, and protect your body from burnout, but also protect your mind. I've been joining a men's group. I recommend men's and women's groups for a lot of the mental stuff that affects our physiology. So something else to be aware of is that our mental burnout or overstressed can really affect our physiology in a big way. Take time to eat good fermented foods, prebiotic microbiome support. I've kind of mentioned that already, and avoid a lot of those processed foods. Just make sure you're doing some regular self-care. And these are important pieces when it comes to the immune system. So I'll leave it there. You guys kind of understand this, I'm sure already, but I really wanted to bring this top of mind because I think it gets missed over sometimes, that we don't realize that there's so much we can do just in our daily life, in the way we structure our year, in the way we structure our time, that can help protect us from getting sick in the winter. And I would say, you don't always have to rely on herbs. There's a lot of ways to just work with it naturally. But of course, I'm a herbalist, so help your herbalists learn about herbs. Let's talk about some surface level herbs to begin with, and just kind of dive into plant medicine and how it can support us. All right, so the first one, kind of the king of the immune herbs, the most famous of them all, is Echinacea. Now, Echinacea is a beautiful flower. It's something that grows really well in Alberta. Highly recommend, even if you take Echinacea in a capsule or a tincture or a pill or a powder, or you make tea with it, that you grow it. It's really easy to grow in your gardens, and it's really hardy. It's a perennial plant. So if you're going to grow it, you want to wait at least 3 years before you harvest the root, and then replant all the babies and keep growing it. I recommend, even if you don't use the Echinacea you grow, it's really worth having a few of these around. The seed heads, every year you can harvest, and those seeds are really good for the immune system. They're very full of phenols, and you can just chew on those seeds and it'll help as a kind of an anti-plague mask almost, chewing on Echinacea seeds. They gently stimulate the immune system. And this was actually the original snake oil. I know that term snake oil is used now for something that doesn't work, that is like a fake medicine. Well, originally Echinacea was used for snake and venom bites and for all kinds of insect bites and things like typhoid fever and all kinds of cholera and various pathogens that we didn't understand. Echinacea has this panacea effect of supporting the immune system. Now, it's been considered an immunostimulant, but for lack of better words, there's also lots of polysaccharides in there. And so it has a lot of immunomodulating properties too. Stimulants are things that stimulate the immune system to function at a higher level of performance. Modulants are things that modulate the immune system's activity according to what's in the area. So medicinal mushrooms are a great example of immunomodulants. If there's autoimmune conditions, like the immune system's overstimulated, then they will calm it down. Now, in practice, in anecdotal practice, even though there's immunomodulant activity in Echinacea, if you take Echinacea tincture, you're getting more of the phenols and less of the polysaccharides. And so it is much more of a stimulant. So this is the kind of herb that we would use as a tincture primarily if we want to use it for surface level immunity. And it has this zap, like it's just an amazing bite on the tongue that anybody who's taken Echinacea will always remember that. It kind of has a bit of a numbing it to the tongue. Another herb like Spilanthes is another one I think of that does a similar thing. But these phenols in it are really what do that and stimulate the immune system to function better. I consider this to be one of the master herbs for the immune system. And it's one of my primary ones I use in formula as the sort of leader or chief or top herb to help organize the immune system. It really stimulates macrophage activity, which means it builds up the immune system, turns on the white blood cells, says, hey, time to get on alert, boys and girls. We've got pathogens in the system. Let's hunt them out and just turn everybody on and get protective. So it's also been used sort of, I guess, as that defense against pathogenic bacteria because of that. I find Echinacea tea to be really soothing on a sore throat, or we make it into a spray and we put it into our throat spray as a way to soothe inflammation in the throat. It has an anti-inflammatory and pain sort of quality to it, so it numbs a bit of pain, hence why it's such a great immune herb, especially if there's soreness or tightness. Sometimes the initial stages of getting sick are sore, tight muscles or headache. I know if any of you have ever been sick, which is all of you at some point, and just to be clear, getting sick is not bad, but how do we move that sickness cycle through us more effectively versus try to stop it? And this is sort of more holistic approach. How do we move it through us? Oh, we're gonna get the rain in my area, so you're gonna hear a bit of rain in the background here. Okay, so reducing pain and inflammation is a big part of that. And that's part of how it works. I will say we put this into a bunch of our blends. It's in our cold defense tincture, which is our #1 surface immune tincture that really stimulates the immune system to function at a higher level of performance. So I'm a big fan of the cold defense. What I tend to suggest with that tincture or tinctures like that for surface immunity, that you macro dose these, you heroic dose them. The bottle will say take 1 to 2 droppers, which is about 2 to 3 milliliters. My suggestion is with a tincture like that, if you're getting sick, you take about 6 to 8 milliliters, 2 to 3 to 4 times a day, and do that whole tincture in 4 or 5 days, right as you're getting sick. That's how it's really effective. Now, if you're just lightly sick or you're coming down off a cold, taking 2 dropperfuls is great. I see some people use it as immune protection, although I will say some of these herbs, and we'll get into the ones like Goldenseal next, but some of these herbs that are antibacterial and antipathogenic, they're also slightly anti-life. So if you take them for too long all the time, they can start to harm our good bacteria. So most of our surface level herbs are designed when we actually, or to be used anyway, when we actually have those immunological issues coming in place. So we don't just take them all the time. Although I do know a number of people who take Echinacea daily and have no problems with it. As a capsule or a powder, it becomes more of that modulatory effect, and that's a better way to take it for that kind of use. Otherwise, tincture, straight up, best way to do right at the beginning of a cold, and take it in more macro doses. Okay, defense against the dark arts, as I call it, the defense tea is one of our immune teas that really helps to defend and protect the body. It also has Echinacea in it. Next, we're going to talk about Goldenseal. And Goldenseal is one of those great Barberini herbs that has a lot of immune protection. Malcolm, can you give me a check? Is my rain bothering anybody? Is it too loud? Because I just noticed it got quite rainy here, and so I might have to move. But if not, it's all good. Maybe in the chat, somebody say, is that distracting you? Okay, all good, no problem. All right, great. I can hear it, but that's okay. That's just me. Perfect. All right, so Goldenseal. This one we call King of the Mucous Membranes. When I was going to herb school, this is one of my favorite herbs, but it's also one of my least favorite herbs because I have PTSD from Goldenseal. When I was a kid, it was that ooky, yellow, gooky stuff that I did not like. My mom always said, oh, time for the Goldenseal. I'm like, no, I'm not sick. I swear I'm not sick. And it's because the Goldenseal has this really bitter flavor to it. That's the barberinis in there, the barbaric acids, and barberines are an alkaloid actually that stimulate the immune system and really pump up the mucous membranes. So they help the mucous membranes produce cleaner, clearer mucus. One of the reasons we produce mucus when we get sick is actually to move out toxins. So that thick yellow mucus we get is full of bacteria or pathogens that our body is using as natural defense to push that out. Goldenseal helps stimulate this and move out that catarrh. It's really good for pathogenic organisms in the microbiome of the gut, as well as in the lungs. So we have an affinity mostly for bacteria, although there are some slight antiviral and anti-inflammatory effects in it. So that's good in that way. It really helps fight off infection though. I've seen Goldenseal work wonders in my body. Even as a little kid, I didn't like it. It was yucky, but it sure did kick the immune system's butt, or kick pathogens butt. So this is one of my go-to herbs for definitely when something has got into the lungs and you start to get sick. Straight up Goldenseal. But because those barberinis are hard on the microbiome, I recommend that you only do Goldenseal for a max of 2 weeks, no more. Any more than that, and you start to harm the good gut bacteria. This also goes for things like oil of oregano. A lot of people are into oil of oregano these days. Well, I've seen people actually come in with stomach ulcers from taking too much oil of oregano all the time. So just be careful. It's great for surface level immunity, but max it out at a week or two. Anything more than that, and you're really starting to harm the body. These are powerful herbs, and they shouldn't be treated lightly that way. So Goldenseal is another one we put in the cold defense. And again, it kind of works as that mucous membrane antibacterial support at a deep level. If you want something for kids, because Goldenseal is not always ideal, another herb called Oregon grape is often used for kids. It has barberini in it, but it's not quite as potent and not quite as hard on the microbiome. So we see Oregon grape as a great alternative. Goldenseal is one of those herbs that is really amazing, but the wild stands of Goldenseal, because it's a perennial, the wild stands have been really eradicated, and there's not a lot of it in the wild. So it's one of those semi-endangered plants, which means we need to be working with organically grown, ethically cultivated Goldenseal. So if you are wanting to choose Goldenseal, make sure that you're buying it from a company that is using an ethically cultivated organic Goldenseal, like Harmonic Arts. And not everybody does. If people are wild foraging this herb, it's definitely out of integrity with the natural world, because this is one of those plants that is in major decline, and we want to see come back into these ecosystems. Part of that decline is that the ecosystems themselves are being cut down. This is one of the problems with these kind of shade forest herbs. We're losing the ecosystems in general, but also over harvesting of Goldenseal in the early eclectic years, the 1800s, 1900s. This herb was a major power, and people were really using it to support the immune system. So, okay. So anyway, that's a great herb. One of my favorites, though, I know I said that it's one of the Goldenseal is a good one, but I really like Uznia. This is just such a cool plant. And it's not really a plant. It's actually a fungus that symbioses with an algae that also symbioses with a photosynthetic bacteria. There are 3 organisms living in one. And I think of lichens, which is what Uznia is, as the poster child for symbiosis. I mentioned the holobiont. Well, here's a good example of a true holobiont where this system cannot thrive without itself. These fungus and algae have grown so intertwined that they no longer are separate. They are completely reliant on each other. The fungal outer walls help to protect the Uznia, and the photosynthetic bacteria and the algae help to bring in energy from, I guess, like they help the carbon chain to actually produce energy. So it has this really powerful symbiosis in it. And I just love that. We don't know enough about lichens, and I think there's a whole lot more. There's a great book actually that Robert Rogers does on lichens, and I feel like there's a lot around lichen medicine that we could start to liken or start to work with. Uznia is the one that we know the most about, but the challenge with it is it's really hard to get the medicine out of Uznia. Similar to the medicinal mushrooms, you can't just chew this medicine or make tea with it as easily. You need to really break it down. So you need to chop it up, mash it up, decoct it, and do a dual extracted tincture. So that's what we do with Uznia, is we actually make a dual extract similar to how we make a mushroom tincture, where we do a decoction and then an alcohol extraction. We need to really mash it for the alcohol extraction. So a mortar and pestle or some kind of tool like that to mash the outer cell walls that are fungal, to actually break them open and get to that inner part. Uznic acid is one of the main active compounds in this herb. And something that it does, and that I think is really neat, is that it's not like Goldenseal, where Goldenseal is kind of the herb that comes in with the big Barberini, for lack of better words, weapon or gun or spear or sword or whatever, and cuts right through bacteria or shoots them or whatever you want to say. It basically takes them out in a more like direct focus. Whereas what Uznia does that I think is really cool is Uznia actually is more like a Shaolin ninja of the immune system. It goes in and it shuts down bacteria's ability to produce ATP or energy or cash, for lack of better words. Bacteria no longer have the ability to reproduce as fast and effectively when Uznic acid gets in and is a biofilm disruptor and builds into their stop them from actually producing energy. So it has some antiviral properties this way, slightly, but more antibacterial. And I just think this is really neat because it's a different way of sort of like the Shaolin ninja doing that, like whatever it is, 5-finger punch or whatever that kind of thing is, and then the heart explodes. That's sort of what Uznia does. Sorry for the graphic analogies, but in a way, it really shuts down bacteria's ability to produce energy. And so it gets in there and stops it from reproducing. And this is bacteria's best strategy. Every 15 minutes, they're rapidly reproducing. And when they find a niche or an ecosystem that they can thrive in, that's when we really start to get sick. So not only does it help with that ecosystem, but it also stops their reproductive function. I like to think of Uznia as helping the trees breathe better. You only find lichens like this in healthy, unpolluted ecosystems, and they really help those ecosystems breathe better. They work in symbiosis with the trees. They're not pathogenic on them. And in this same way, they kind of, that sort of lens of working symbiosis with the body's natural defense systems to protect us from pathogens. They're great for the lungs, aka like they help breathe better. They're also really good for antifungal activity. So things like candida and fungal infections. They support basically in general that healthy immune response. So it's another one that we put into our cold defense. It used to be in our defense tea, but we were finding it wasn't brewing properly enough. People weren't getting the maximum out of the Uznia, so we took it out. But it's one that you could definitely do as a decoction. And I would recommend having a bit of Uznia. If you pick it from the forest, it's really one you can easily ethically harvest. You have to know that you have the right lichen, and there's these little cords in it that kind of has elastic that expand, and you can see it. Google it a little bit. Watch my video on YouTube on Uznia. You can learn a lot more about that there, how to identify it properly. Once you have the right lichen, it blows down in the winter's forests or winter storms. So you can harvest it off the ground, have some on hand, keep it for your bone broths, keep it for your soups. Whenever you're making a broth, throw a little bit of Uznia in for a little extra immune protection. That's something I like to do. So we have a little stash of Uznia in the kitchen, ready to go in with our chicken bone ginseng soup or whatever we're going to make. So anyway, we also something else just for like broths, because I think bone broths, and even if you're not if you don't eat animal products and you're just a vegetarian, is what we do is we have a bag in the freezer that we throw all of our good kitchen scraps. And I just want to give this kind of little tip. If you're making broths, they're super good for the immune system. Obviously, with bone broths, we're getting that integrity of the bone marrow from the animal, and that's helping support it. But one of the things we can do is every time we're chopping onions, take the onion skins, put them in a Ziploc bag in the freezer, take the carrot stems, take the broccoli stems, take the peels off of things, put them in a bag, and then you can, when you're ready to make a stew, you got this nice freezer bag full of broth ingredients. Love it. Yeah. Thanks, Malcolm, for posting the lichen video. I liken that. Yeah, we've got a lot of videos on many of these herbs. So yeah, keep going. Okay, so we're going to move to antivirals. I'm going to kind of move us along here. Herbal antivirals, there's not that many of them. And I did just briefly talk about surface level immune herbs. There are so many more. So don't think that that's the end of them. I just, for sake of time, I wanted to just focus on a couple, just also because I feel like you could easily be overloaded. This isn't a herbal education class. It's a little bit of one for the immune system. But if you really want to go deeper into immune herbs, I highly recommend taking Herbology 101 from Wild Rose College, or getting into our Western Materia Medicas, which are the kind of courses where you have much deeper, more robust content on herbs. So yeah, if you want to go deeper, that's where I would recommend going. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, quick question from Eva. Do vegetable scraps have to be organic? They don't. But the thing is there are certain plants that have a lot of pesticides attached. So just be aware of that. And really, it's about your own choices, right? I would recommend that you really just eat with the best integrity, and also within the budget you can. You know, if you can't afford organic broccoli, doesn't mean your broccoli's bad. Maybe just give it a good wash, and also every so often do a detox and cleanse out. I really believe in resilience, and something that we can do even if we have pathogens and pesticides and heavy metal residues in our diet, that we do gentle detoxing once or twice a year and pull that stuff out of our diet. We're not going to get away from it, guys. These cell phones, these computers, these environmental pollutants, they're everywhere. You know, an example is, well, I'll just say an example of our chaga. We found, we're finding issues with chaga in the pesticide tests. It was organically wild or harvested, but the harvesters were spraying DEET on themselves, and our tests were picking up DEET residue in some of the chaga that was being harvested, and they're using DEET as their way to protect against the mosquitoes in the chaga field. So just know that, or the chaga forests, just know that it's really hard to get away when you start to actually look at some of these tests. Minute amounts of toxins are everywhere, my friends. So just be proactive and do some resilience stuff. Work with your Shilajit, work with your activated charcoal, work with your gentle detoxing every year, at least once a year. I think is really important. Okay, on to herbal antivirals. Let's see what we got here. First one, this one, oh yes, the Elder Moor, the Elder Mother. Elderberry has one of the most interesting folklore histories, and I do have another video on elderberry. You could learn more at the Herbal Jedi YouTube channel, but you can scroll through it to the last link Malcolm put in. You'll find it. The thing about elder is it was always considered the elder mother or the elder moor as sort of like from the underworld. This is a herb of the underworld. The entire plant is toxic, other than the berries. there's old fables. Don't leave your baby sleeping under an elderberry tree, or the elves will come and switch it out, or the elder mother will come and switch it out for an elven baby. And you won't even know until they're older, right? So like this mythos around this plant. And one of the things that it does is it's one of our best antivirals. And I think a lot of the mythos around elderberry has to do with the fact that it helps to, it's again, defense against the dark arts, against what we thought was at one point before we understood viruses existed, we thought was spiritual magic, basically, or some kind of ill wish that was causing us to get sick with viral load. Well, elderberry happens to be one of the best antivirals we know of, and it's one of the most gentle ones, which is what I love, because many other antivirals like Osha or Lomatium or Baptisma, these are very strong antivirals that have a very powerful, similar to the Goldenseal analogy versus the Uznia. I would say elderberry is that kind of gentle way of supporting the immune system against viral load. And how does it do this? Two different ways. One of the biggest things it is it's a biofilm disruptor, which means it disrupts the biofilm on the outside of a virus. So it actually helps to penetrate the biofilm. And by doing this, it marks the virus so the immune system can see it. The analogy I give is it's like a paintball gun. It hits the virus, splat, and it biofilm disrupts it. So now the immune system can actually see, oh, that's a virus. I don't want that in my system, and start to build antiviral protection against that virus. So it becomes a biofilm disruptor is one way that it works against viruses, but it also helps to paint the outside of cells, and it works on the biofilm of our cells to block from viruses entering. If you know a little bit about viruses, you'll understand that they enter the cell, they get into the DNA, they pull it apart and insert their RNA, and then build more of themselves until they blow up the cell, and out comes a whole lot more virus. That's kind of how they work. Simplified version of that. Lots of cool videos on how viruses work if you really want to tune into that. But the reality is that by protecting the outer cell walls of our cells and biofilm disrupting the cell walls of the virus, they really do an effective job at actually supporting the immune system to do its job in fighting viruses. Most of the time, the problem with viruses is our immune system doesn't even know where to start. It doesn't see them. They're tiny. They hide inside of cells until they blow up. And then boom, you've got tons of viral load that we don't have protective antibodies against. So this is a really great herb for that kind of thing. How we might use elderberry is as a syrup. That's probably my favorite way. And I highly recommend you make elderberry syrup yourself. We, of course, sell an elderberry syrup, but it's something that I just think is really good to have on hand. And it's not hard. We do, I think, again, at Wild Rose, I do a herbal pharmacy class. We teach you how to make elderberry syrup, but I've also done a number of free live videos out there in the world around making syrups. It's something that's not hard. Most of this medicine is what I call people's medicine, which means it's easy to do. It doesn't require massive technology or infrastructure to make. Basically, a big cauldron and a whole bunch of witches. No, I'm just kidding. Eye of elderberry and ear of elderberry and wing of other elderberry in the stew pot. No, but really it's a decoction that we make, and then we add honey. That's how simple it is. We can do honey and alcohol if we want to lock it in. And the more honey and alcohol we add, the more it preserves it at different ratios, making it as concentrated as possible. But syrups are easy. They're easy to make. Highly recommend you make them. And or you buy our elderberry syrup. We can then also take, instead of alcohol, lock it in with a bit of elderberry tincture to really make it that much more potent. Some of the chemistry is extractable in alcohol, and some of it's really well extractable in water. So, yeah, that's right. Charlotte mentioned that she was drinking a chai mix, I think, that had elderberry. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to mention that. But the reality is that you can add elderberries to all kinds of teas. I love it. It's in our defense tea, our kind of immune support tea from Harmonic Arts. It's also in our viral support tincture, and it's in the elderberry syrup. Those are ways we make it. It's really good for kids. I find it's gentle and it's sweet elderberry syrup. So it's something that's easy to make for kids. So big recommendation for me. Make elderberry syrup as a kid's immune medicine. I would also say another piece that works for the whole immune integrity is that it's packed full of flavonoids. It's got lots of vitamin C and lots of antioxidants. The dark, rich black or blue elderberries are full of antioxidants. So highly recommend. This is a herb that you can actually grow in Alberta. So you might want to think about it. I'm not sure how well it grows in some of the coldest parts. I do see it in BC a lot. I don't know how much I see elderberry. It's been a while since I've been to Alberta, but I've seen it there. But I know you can grow it. I remember I think Blaine had some elderberry growing at one point, but that was like protected in the backyard. So you might need to go to BC to harvest it, or you can buy it from lots of red elderberry Malcolm's mentioning in the chat. So the red elderberry, you can make elderflower medicine with the red elderberry. So I'm a big fan of that. The red elderberry has more of those toxic anthocyanins in the seeds. You could do an elderberry juice, and of course it's available in health food stores, right? It's very easily accessible in a health food store. Zambucus nigra is the one I'm mentioning here. Zambucus racemosa is the red elderberry that probably is the one that grows in Alberta. I love to make elderflower tea with that elderberry. That's a huge yummy one to make elderflower cordials and teas that way in the summer months. But yeah, anyway, love this plant. I think there's a big affinity for it from my heart because it has helped heal my kids. It's a great one to just have on hand, and it's just a really fun mocktail too. So we make elderberry syrup mocktails, just add it to bubbly water and drink it as like a sophisticated thing. When we were making a lot of elderberry syrup at home, when we first sort of started Harmonic Arts and we were kind of working out of the farmhouse, we'd always have like a good couple of shot glasses of elderberry syrup and make these little mocktails. And that's sort of been a tradition for us, is to drink elderberry syrup during the immune system. Okay, or immune system months. On to the next. Osha. Now, here's another herb that actually grows in the high Kootenays and over some of the passes and mountain ranges, but it's also another one that's slightly endangered. You know, there's a friend of mine does a talk called "Where Did All the Osha Grow?" or "Where Did All the Osha Go?" And it is being over harvested. So it's one that we want to treat with care and not overuse. But it's just such a powerful immune herb that I really love to share about it. This is one that is just a great antiviral and probably one of my favorite for opening up the lungs and helping remove pathogens from the lungs. So just great herb for moving out pathogens and just really getting the body flowing, especially deep breath. So Osha, when I've got like kind of lung congestion, it's one of my favorite herbs to work with. I also love to just chew on the root a little bit during immune season as a protective. So if I'm around a lot of people getting sick, chew a little bit of Osha root. So I tend to have a little piece of this at home on hand, and it just has this like powerful, effervescent kind of like mouth, nose breathing, kind of feeling, similar to elecampane, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. And so maybe I'll kind of leave Osha for a bit here. Just know that this is one of the great herbs for antiviral. Lomatium is another great one that's similar to this, that has a similar quality. I really like these kind of herbs. This one's also known as bear root because the bears would dig it up in the spring to help support their immune system. And so it's a common favorite immune herb for bears in that sense. So yeah, very antibacterial, anti-inflammatory, cleansing to the liver, and really just pulling out toxins in general. Powerful herb, not one to be used all the time, just in small doses. We put it in our lung and cough syrup because it really helps to move out that catarrh and work with the lungs. And we also put it into our cold defense tincture as the sort of antiviral protective quality. Very different from elderberry. This is like the Goldenseal of the antivirals. It has that big sword or whatever it is, weapon to really like take down viruses on a front attack and say, just sort of blow them out of the water. So yeah, powerful herb, good one to work with. Okay, I'm going to talk about some herbs for deep immunity. Yeah. And so we're going to go from surface immunity, where we're dealing with pathogens and things right at the surface of our immune system, to stuff that gets deeper into our body. What happens is if we don't deal with those pathogens, or we have deeper chronic long-term illnesses, they become deep immune stuff and we get weakened over time. So probably the number one herb to look at here is Astragalus. Love this herb. This is one of my favorite. It's also known as sweet vetch. It has this sweet flavor. So this is definitely one you could grow in Alberta. I know we grew it on Chiron Farm for a long time, there in foothills just outside of Calgary. And this is a great herb for immune support. It's a perennial root. So it's something that it comes out of Chinese medicine though. So it's not native, but there are vetches that are native. And I'm not sure how well they could be used interchangeably, but Astragalus has definitely been one that I would probably plant versus use some other kind of vetch, because of that. So, because it's got just so much history and really is shown to be this deep immune protective. It's known as what is it? I forgot, not Wei Qi. It's something Qi, lung Qi in Chinese medicine. It has a name. There's affiliated and has an affinity around the lungs. So Astragalus is one that can be deep lung supportive. It's got a yellow lung Qi is, I think, sort of its name in Chinese. I'm not giving it the best there, but basically it gently boosts immune function overall and has that immunomodulating effect. It's got lots of those polysaccharides that we've grown to know about more in the medicinal mushrooms, and it really helps protect cells from free radical damage, and just as a sort of more of an immune tonic to support the immune system. We consider this to be one of the great herbs for deep immune function. So it's something you might want to drink Astragalus tea in the winter months. Like I'm going to say January, February, when like you've been hit, the seasons are kind of getting into that deep winter. Astragalus really shines here, as well as in deep lung infections like bronchitis and chronic congestion of the lungs. Even people who have kind of like chronic lung hay fever or asthma, Astragalus can be really helpful that way. But there's another herb that I really like for that kind of asthma, hay fever, deep lung stuff, and that's elecampane. This herb is just so potent. This is just one of my favorite herbs. It's another one I think I've done a YouTube video on. It grows massive, these like 9-foot sunflowers, basically, little small sunflowers, and it's just got such a great, huge, gnarly root that is just full of these like decongesting, I think there's some phenols in there, but there's just like some of that like effervescent, like, whoa, all right, just my lungs go deep breath when I use elecampane. Just even chewing on it, it's got a bit of spice to it, and it's just a powerful herb. I've given this to a number of people with asthma and had really great results over the years to help support their lung congestion, just in a tincture form. Elecampane straight on its own is great. Something that a couple of friends of mine, the way they dose it now is sort of instead of a puffer. Now, I'm not going to say this is going to cure asthma, but I've seen a number of people use it and taking like a 2 droppers full, or even small, like a couple of drops, just even hold it in micro doses in the as a simple, just in the body for when they're feeling congested and they get that kind of allergy season comes in. But bigger than that is really just decongesting the lungs and sinuses and bronchioles and working with fighting off pathogens in that area. So one of the best herbs, in my opinion, for working with the lungs and deep lung stuff. If you're someone who gets lung congestion regularly, this is definitely a good one to have on hand. We use it in both our lung and cough syrup, but also our breathed tea. So it is one of those herbs that is great for helping breathe deeper. Our breathed tea is basically our lung formula at Harmonic Arts, and it's pretty awesome. It's one of my go-tos during the winter months. I always have it on hand, especially when it starts to get heavy and thick. Here on the West Coast, we got a lot of rain, and it gets really heavy and thick at times, and it can be hard on the lungs. So I'm a big fan of elecampane. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I'm coming to Alberta in November to get away from the rainy season here. So yeah, just a quick side note, I will be in Alberta in November, doing a live class in the Light Cellar and a couple other things. So we'll see you all then. Those of you who are there, I really hope to see you in Alberta when I come. But I love coming there for your dry, high altitude air. At some times of the year, it gets really congested here. Yes, Malcolm says details coming soon, and definitely we're stoked to see you guys live as much as possible, not just here on the interwebs. Okay, so yeah, Elecampane is just a really great herb to start to work with for bronchial congestion in general, and it's definitely one that's near and dear to my heart. Yeah, another name is it elfwort, to ward off the influence of evil elves. That's just some fun old folklore around Elecampane too. One of these old European herbs. It's got lots of great fun folklore around it. Okay, I'll leave it there though for Elecampane. Although I will say, yeah, it's used all over in Chinese medicine as well. Some of the sort of, because it has that warming effect, it's when the body has chills and cold, we want to use Elecampane. On to turkey tail though. Here's a mushroom that is very well known, and probably a lot of you have learned a lot about turkey tail if you've been taking other classes at the Light Cellar, because they really do a good job there of supporting people in understanding mushrooms. And this is one of the kind of antiviral mushrooms, but also gentle immunomodulant, one of the more effective immunomodulants that has been used for everything from cancer treatment to strengthening and protecting the liver to restoring gut health and the microbiome. It's very anti-inflammatory, but it also has a lot of these antiviral qualities to it. So it works as that immunomodulant, and I really like turkey tail for those effects, really for just supporting the overall immune system. I think of it as one of the most hard-working mushrooms in the fungal wood wide web. Turkey tail grows on almost every kind of tree. It's really adaptive at breaking down tissues. So for when it comes to pathogens, it has a really good restoring of the biome effect. So that's probably one of my favorite things about turkey tail is to work with. But we'll say people who have things like HIV have seen good success from it, as well as cancer treatment and chemotherapy. It's one of those ones that's been really heavily researched, second most heavily researched mushroom on the planet. And I'll say the first one is reishi mushroom, but this one has a lot of immune benefits. So I'd almost choose turkey tail over reishi for the immune system, although reishi is my very favorite mushroom of all time, and I would definitely pick reishi over turkey tail in general because of its grounding effects and just tuning the body at a deeper level. But turkey tail does a really good job of restoring and supporting our immune integrity and the microbiome. But I'm not going to take too long to talk about it because I do want to get to Q&A, and I realize I'm just talking about it too much. We do turkey tail in all kinds of forms. Our medicinal mushrooms, as well as our antiviral support, is probably some of the best turkey tail you'll find on the open market. That's because we use a wild cultivated turkey tail that is properly extracted to get the phenolic compounds and to have just the highest integrity of good quality turkey tail. So another one of these mushrooms that's awesome for the immune system is chaga. I know a number of chagavores who drink chaga tea all winter long. I put a little bit of chaga powder into my adaptogen latte tonight, which is now getting cold because I'm nursing it. But yeah, I find that this is one that's very anti-inflammatory. It's one of the most antioxidant substances on the planet. So it really does a good job of pulling out infection and does a really good job of restoring the immune system and supporting it. Obviously, we get to know more about turkey or chaga. We understand it's got these antiviral terpenes in it, which is from the betulinic acid and concentrating on the outer black part of the chaga. And then inside, we have more of those polysaccharides that are immunomodulating and a lot of those other antioxidants. So there is an antiviral quality to chaga. You want to work with wild or birch-grown chaga because a lot of the mycelial-based chaga that's on the market really doesn't have the same active chemistry. It doesn't have all of those terpenes and betulinic acid and the SOD or superoxide dismutase that is free radical scavenging. Wild chaga has well over 200 phytonutrients in it, and it's just super potent, but also tastes good. So one of my favorite ways to work with chaga these days anyway, is to make a chaga syrup. I do love drinking chaga tea. And so in the winter, this time of year is usually when I put the pot on with chaga, and we'll let that brew 5-6 times. Although I haven't started a chaga pot yet this year. Maybe that's because I hasn't really been winter yet or fall yet. So probably in October through November, we'll start to get chaga on the stovetop. One of my favorite things is I pull out the crock pot from the basement and we just have chaga on the crock pot. And that's kind of one of my favorite ways to go. And then also, I would say you can use chaga powder. We do a dual extracted chaga powder that is really easy to just put in hot water and make tea. So that to me is one of the best ways to work with chaga, is just use that hot water and put a little bit of chaga powder in, and you get a nice, easy, instant tea from our Harmonic Arts chaga powder. I see Joanne asking about the 5 mushroom blend from Harmonic Arts. The 5 mushrooms that are in there are reishi, chaga, turkey tail, lion's mane, and cordyceps. Those are what mushrooms are in the chaga. I will say turkey tail, I think the question, another one is asking about, does it grow in Alberta? It does grow on the edges of Alberta. You don't have the same true turkey tail in the center of Alberta, but along the like Echinacea and into Jasper and in those edges, you get a real true turkey tail. There are some fuller mushrooms in Alberta that look like turkey tail, but there's lots of turkey tail in BC and along the edges. You might even see some there might be some other spots where you get good turkey tail, but it's really along the edges and really into BC. Chaga grows in northern Alberta, in parts of BC on birch, where there's big birch stands. So these are 2 mushrooms you can actually find in your ecosystem pretty easily. Chaga syrup, like I mentioned, is one of our favorite ways to work with chaga, although I really like the chaga powder. So that's been more on my note. The chaga syrup, though, in bubbly water, oh man, chaga syrup and ginger syrup in bubbly water is just such a great tea. So that's something I really love and often am drinking. I'm going to mention reishi just lightly because I don't want to talk about reishi too much. I know we're running out of time, so I'll just say this is another great adaptogen. There's lots of great stuff on reishi. I've done a number of YouTube videos. Malcolm, I'm sure, and Danny and other folks from the Light Slayer have talked in depth about reishi. This is my all-time favorite mushroom because it's grounding and calming down the immune system and really supporting us through all of our, what I call nature deficit disorder of the modern world. So it has those kind of anti-pathogenic qualities, pulling out toxins like radiation and heavy metals, and it's really anti-inflammatory and really supporting our cardiovascular system and immune in general. So I'll leave it there with reishi. It can be found in lots of products from Harmonic Arts and from other places. But I just wanted to, I guess I'm going to pass through a couple of slides here using tinctures. Really simply, why we want a tincture, and I really am a big fan of tinctures, is that we get to extract the best plant chemistry. We bypass the digestive system, and we get a really long shelf life. There's also a small amount of alcohol, which people often have a fear of tinctures being in alcohol. But if you think of 1 bottle of tincture as having the same amount of alcohol as a glass of wine, but you're taking it over 21 days, very, very little. I took tinctures as a kid, all the way from 4 years old and up. We give our kids tinctures. And so something I would invite is that there's not so much alcohol as you think in a tincture. Put it in a shot of hot water or apple juice, and you've got a 0.01% alcohol. So yeah, I'm a big fan of using them in acute and maintenance dosing. So really, as it's labeled on the bottle, but you can also use hero dosing, like I said, in the cold defense. We don't put that on the slide, but I will say that you might want to take a really high dose in that kind of acute situation, really, which might be like 4 to 6 milliliters, maybe even up to 8 milliliters of a cold defense type tincture during, or a viral support during an infection. Whereas maintenance dose is how we might use them on the bottle. You can also do drop dosage of tinctures. That's another great way. A big common myth around working with tinctures is putting them under the tongue. We put them on the tongue, not under the tongue. Okay. So I'm going to just, we can use syrups, mushrooms, all these kinds of things. And I'm going to leave it there. I want to just say thanks. you can learn lots more about Harmonic Arts and what we do. We got lots of tips and recipes on our website. We also do a whole series of webinars that you can tune in for free. harmonicartslive.ca or live.com, but there's a webinar button on the Harmonic Arts website to link there, and follow us on Instagram and all of our channels to get more webinars and recipes and fun ideas to work with herbs. And yeah, you can also follow me in any other form. But yeah, I'm going to leave it for there. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will jump off of the slideshow and answer any kind of questions. I would love to just invite, if you have thoughts around immune system or questions or herbs you want to know more about when working with the immune system, to bring that up now. And I see Malcolm is back, but you're muted.
Okay, there we are. Perfect. Yeah, thank you so much. Well, thanks everybody for sticking around. This is going to be the Q&A portion. Everything that has been posted so far, I have collected, and I'll be kind of speaking that out to Yarrow. The one that just came right through, Nick asks, are all the Harmonic Arts products available at Light Cellar? And the answer is yes. I think we've been Yarrow's best supporter since day one. I don't know if we are anymore. You're across the country, and we don't post them online, but they are available in store. You can also order directly from harmonicarts.ca as well. So let's dive into some of those questions. And just the first one that was off the top of my head was you were asked if someone had posted, does it grow in Alberta? They're actually asking about elecampane, and I don't know. I personally haven't grown it before. Can you grow elecampane in Alberta, Yarrow?
I think you can. You know what? I have hold on. I've got a little like it grows all through Europe, right? And so we have like that. It's almost like you can grow it in England. I know that you can grow it in lots of parts of Europe. Let's see. It's commonly cultivated in Eastern North America, and grows in Ireland. Yeah, I think you probably could grow elecampane. It's pretty hardy. Like it's got a really, like if you can grow sunflowers, I think you can grow elecampane, no problem.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay, cool.
Definitely
Right
a
on.
hardy one.
All
Oh,
right.
look at that. Somebody says they have it in their garden. All right.
All right, excellent.
It's
Cool.
one of the more hardy plants I know. I highly recommend it. It's beautiful, and it's just such a great herb to work with.
All right. So in addition to questions, I'd love to just, have people post in the chat, like what were some of the highlights? What was really kind of like an aha, like what really ticked? Are there any particular herbs that you're now drawn to that you're going to like seek out and try and work with? Maybe you're going to grow them if you're already familiar with it. Just post any kind of like insights. I really appreciated, Yarrow, how you really broke down that, the difference between the deep immune system, the shallow immune system, and then the two different herbs. And there was a question, you kind of answered it in the moment, but I maybe just correct me if I'm paraphrasing this incorrectly. You were talking specifically about Echinacea, that, it's more for that shallow immune, therefore, it's super powerful and it's a short-term herb. Now, can it be generalized that herbs for, the shallow immune system, like you said, that are short-term, or maybe that's a question, are the shallow immune herbs, those kind of like big guns, are they all best taken, short term, and that the deep immune herbs are the ones that you take long term? Is that a fair kind of generalization?
Yeah, well, like Echinacea is something. So, for example, Wild Rose made a capsule called BEVC that was meant to be used daily, and it was beta carotene, Echinacea, and vitamin C. And so when you take it, like I mentioned, in a powder or a capsule form, there you're getting those polysaccharides, right? So Echinacea tincture long term, probably not a good idea, because you're mostly pulling out of the alcohol soluble compounds, which are phenols, right? So Echinacea is not a good one to do long term that way. But there hasn't, like, a lot of people take Echinacea all the time, and I don't think there's been a problem with that. Anecdotally, that's never been seen as a big issue for people. So the problem is more when it comes down to, like, if you want to like and stimulate the immune system, you want to like go full forward with that, right? A lot of herbs shouldn't be taken all the time, except for maybe adaptogens and mushrooms. Those are kind of some of the ones that I might use on a regular basis. Or herbs like milk thistle, but even then, milk thistle is far more effective if you use it for like 3 months and then take a break, right? Than it is if you use it all the time. So in general, that's my belief in that, is that using these kind of herbs almost allopathically for acute, direct focus. A lot of these surface level herbs is ideal, but at the same time, the problem is that what we've seen now is people have gone like more is better. Like I mentioned with the oil of oregano, literally having somebody coming in with stomach ulcers that was going to have to get operated on because of oil of oregano. You know, like just overdoing it, right? People tend to think more is better, and sometimes that's not the case.
Cool. That's what I love about your approach to tincture making. Like the drop dose can be great, can be effective in that way. All right. So one of the questions we got right off the top was he asked, can you comment on immune boosting strategies for children? 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds. What would you recommend?
Malcolm, it's gotten really rainy here, so just give me a second. I'm gonna mute and I'm gonna run inside because I need to move. All right.
All
So I
right.
can
Yeah,
barely
no
hear you.
worries.
I'm sorry. That's just my ecosystem is like insane. So give me a second. I'll be right back.
Yeah, no worries. Well, it's kind of interesting. I mean, many people commented that we can't hear the rain. We still can't, but I know it's interfering with your ability to hear and what's going on. So, anyways, what a great session. We're just going to be keeping going with the Q&A. Lots of great questions and comments coming through. Yeah, all right. So Jerry says Uznia has intrigued me as well as Ella campaign. Awesome. So just going to read some of the comments before we get back into Q&A. Mikey's all about the Goldenseal now. All right. Left to learn the new herbs relates to one more commonly known with specific targeting differences. Yeah, great info on Uznia. So as I mentioned, I'll send out the recording after this sometime in the next couple of days. I'll include lots of links, including those videos that Yarrow has done on his YouTube Herbal Jedi channel. Okay, so back to the questions. This one was about suggestions for children, even 2 years old, 3 years old, kind of in that age range for building immunity.
Well, so remember how we talked about deep immune and surface immune? We didn't get so far into the adaptogens like I was drinking as a tea, but definitely when it comes to building up immune system for young kids, one of the biggest things is like let them play in the dirt a little bit, let their biome develop, strengthen their connection to the natural world. Some of those things we mentioned at the beginning is super important. And I would say something that's not done a lot. We try to keep our kids hyper clean, and that can be problematic for building their immune integrity. But also like for young kids, when the season is on or they're getting sick, some of the medicinal mushrooms are safe. I know a number of people who use glycerites because they taste good, and or syrups like the elderberry syrup. I don't usually like the idea of giving kids under 2 years old herbs, right? In that sense, I may, if they're really young, I may want to look to like, okay, let's maybe add a little bit of like chaga mushroom or turkey tail mushroom powder into an oatmeal or into a broth, or let's make bone broths and feed our kids that, and maybe add some of the herbs into the bone broth. But really, I don't go too deep until kids are like 3 or 4 years old. And even at that, if they have a lot of immunological issues early on, it's really about their biome development. And so I go back to looking at how do I strengthen the biome and really support the kids' immune integrity. And definitely if kids have done antibiotics, that's when we really want to work with some of the some of the microbiome supplements and things like that we might work with, like the yogurts and things like that. So fermented foods, all these kinds of things are ways I would start to support young kids. Much more gentle. There are options like, instead of Goldenseal, I mentioned the Oregon grape. It's a little gentler. Echinacea is fairly gentle. Elderberry is fairly gentle. These are herbs I would go towards. more off. Astragalus, fairly gentle. I wouldn't be going into heavy immune hardware herbs too young.
Okay. On that note about fermented foods, when you were talking about that kind of your lifestyle practices, they wanted a clarifications. They couldn't quite catch it. They're asking, do we add or eliminate fermented foods to cleanse?
So fermented foods are more about build than cleanse. And I like to think of the kind of that process as wax on, wax off, Karate Kid method of cleansing, which is cleanse off and then build up. So usually we reduce a lot of the fermented foods during a cleanse cycle. Some people would say, well, you could do sauerkraut, no problem. But the reality is most fermented foods, they've broken down the food to be more of the sugars and therefore quicker absorbed, and often can feed some of those pathogenic bacteria as well. We want to eliminate simple absorption. So more fiber, more of these kinds of foods. So usually, and often what fermented foods look like in the modern world is soy sauce, beer, and wine. So like those are the kind of things I'm talking about to eliminate. And then usually what I would do after a cleanse is I do a building cycle where I really heavy up on good quality ferments, right? That we've some of our home ferments. But, I'd say if you're doing sauerkraut during a cleanse, you're not doing it wrong. Like, don't beat yourself up about it.
Okay, cool. Great question here. Where do you find info on contraindications if you're on cancer medication, so as not to interfere with or affect efficacy? And in the comments, I referenced back to Chancel's new book. That might be a good resource for her.
That's great. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Chanchel Cabrera has written a new book on sort of cancer protocol and holistic medicine and using herbs in alignment with cancer pharmaceuticals. So there's a lot. This is a hard one to navigate. I would say there's a lot of research out there, but a lot of doctors are not well informed about how to work with herbs. There's a very clear line: don't do anything else. This is the medicine. We know it works when you do it by itself. Some of the herbs might affect cytochrome P450 in the liver and have detoxification issues along with the harsher pharmaceuticals. So there are some indicators around that. There's some specific herbs I would really avoid. But at the same time, there's evidence of some of these deep immune herbs and some of these adaptogens and some of these medicinal mushrooms being supportive treatments that are used in cultures that are more, I'll say, aligned with holistic energetics, like Chinese medicine. So in Japan and China, there's a lot more people using a mixed protocol, and things like turkey tail are a big one that has been commonly kind of used that way. Chaga actually is made into an anti-cancer pharmaceutical in Russia. So, there is some evidence that can be done well. But at the same time, I would say this is a case by case, navigate this. And I don't have the answer for that question necessarily. I would probably be on the line of avoid all of these immune herbs at this point. Work with most of the lifestyle things you can do. Get lots of antioxidants that you can, good quality, live, living foods, that type of thing. And maybe work with medicinal mushrooms because that's shown to be most effective.
All right. Okay, here's a question from somebody else. If something is good for immunity, is it then also good for repair from working out? Is that?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a kind of like, in some cases, yes, but in other cases, think about like anti-inflammatories, yes. Something that has anti-inflammatory effects, Echinacea as an example, yes. But Goldenseal, yeah, I guess a little bit, but it's sort of counterintuitive. It's like the idea of when I'm digesting to go swimming, kind of thing. Like it's like I'm doing the opposite of what my body wants to do, or when I'm digesting to be running because like my body wants to put the blood in the stomach and work on that. If I'm working on immune stuff, I probably wouldn't be using it as aftercare for working out in that sense. So yeah, I would say that's not necessarily, but especially anti-inflammatories would have a great effect that way.
Cool. Okay, another question related back to kind of cancer. With skin cancers, do the mushrooms only work internally or can they be applied externally? And I'll just mention actually that during the last, oh, when was it? Came out of the Medicinal Mushroom Symposium. I got connected with a guy named Kevin Rurak, and he specifically makes topical creams from the medicinal mushrooms. And he's a bit of a citizen scientist. We had him present at an open house a few months ago, and he was actually distributing the creams to get feedback related to breast cysts. And he's got lots of other applications as well. And so the short answer is like, yes, absolutely. They can be used topically as well as internally. And if you want to, send me an email, I can send you more information. I can connect you with him as well. All
Yeah,
right.
that comes out of also like a lot of the historical use. Many First Nation cultures used mushrooms externally, almost more than internally. Used as antiseptic, anti-pathogen support, band-aid support, anti-lesions, so there's a lot of actual anecdotal historical evidence around that as well. And chaga
Cool.
has definitely been one that's been used externally, big time.
Okay, another question that came through was, can you have too much of any of the mushrooms?
Well, you know what? We have some folks proving that you can out there. Like as people have gone pretty overboard. Chaga is a good example. You can have too much of a good thing for sure. That's like one of the, you can definitely overdo it. I always recommend the path of moderation. If you're overdoing something, it's gonna turn into a problem. So in the case of these, yes, you can do them daily, but if you're like drinking chaga tea all winter long, every day, I think there could be a problem with kidneys, and you could have a like uric acid buildup in the system, and there's potentially issues there. So I would want to be careful with doing too much of any of those things. But that being said, like my dad has taken reishi for 30 years straight, but he's doing like a couple of capsules. He's not macro dosing it, right? So moderation.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Can I take different mushroom tinctures the same time or different time per type of mushroom?
100%. You can definitely take them at the same time. In fact, when I'm doing tinctures, I tend to do it like I like to take a bunch of tinctures at the same time. There isn't a lot of like interactions that are going to cause a negative effect that way. There are a few herbs that like have alkaloids and other ones that have tannins and they might bind to each other. But the reality is most of the time I would take my tinctures at the same time. So definitely.
Cool. And this question is more of like a reverse of that. Do herbs work complementary with other immune support like vitamin C, vitamin D?
Oh yeah. Definitely like that's how, especially like a lot of plants have vitamin C in them, a lot of them have like especially what we've seen is vitamin C is more readily taken when there's flavonoids with it. So having like an elderberry with your vitamin C or a rose hip with your vitamin C is perfect, right? Or a goji berry with your vitamin C that actually makes your vitamin C far more absorbable. And vitamin D, yeah, it's a fat soluble vitamin, so it's not going to have the same kind of effect with herbs. They're not going to interact the same way. Yeah, but there's no problem with taking them together. I just don't think many herbs would increase vitamin D absorption or decrease it in any way.
All right, two last questions. The one of them is super quick. She just missed that when you said about tinctures on the tongue versus under the tongue. So yes, absolutely, he did say on the tongue. And then the last one I think is a nice kind of way to end. Somebody asked, "What about your namesake yarrow?" They actually themselves personally use yarrow as a kind of a herb for colds and flus, that type of thing. Maybe we can finish our session talking about a little bit about yarrow.
Yeah, nice. Love it. Love it. Yeah, so yarrow is one of those really good diaphoretic herbs, which means to help you sweat, to help sweat out toxins. This is a classic herb that was used in sweat lodge to help move out toxins and part of the reason for sweat lodge, at least to most of the traditions that I've been a part of and been part of in sweat lodge, is to cleanse and clear the energetics spiritually, mentally, physically, to move things out of the body. We can consider these to be somewhat pathogens. So yarrow has that antipathogenic kind of quality to pull out toxins, pull out what no longer serves us, to help us sweat it out and move it out of the body. One of the classic fever treatments was a yarrow tea and what's called the wet blanket treatment, where you wrap a wet blanket around yourself and then a warm blanket over top, and you drink yarrow tea, and the wet blanket helps you sweat in and really pull that fever out and pull pathogens out. So it's been classically used that way. It also has some antiseptic qualities, like the root is very numbing to pain, and the leaves are very good for blood stagnation or helping to move things. Women use it for cramping, right? It's a great one for helping move the blood, and just as a both a warrior's and a women's herb. One of my obviously favorite herbs because of my namesake, but it's a gentle herb, but it's also not very tasty, my friends. So I've heard it once called refried porpoise piss. That's what the tea tasted like. So just maybe add some flavor to your yarrow tea. But I think it's a great herb for that diaphoretic quality and just supporting the overall blood movement, cleansing and clearing, and just helping the whole body naturally come back into balance in that way.
Cool, right on. Well, looks like everybody has really enjoyed this session. There's so many great comments, great information. Says Silva, thank you for this. So, honeybee hygiene, I haven't listened to any sessions for a long time. Thank you. Found it very informative. So yeah, really appreciate everyone being on the call, and most especially yourself, Yarrow, sharing your wisdom. And we look forward to seeing you live in person in November. We'll have those details posted to the website very soon. It's always a treat when you come to Calgary. And yeah, thanks again, everybody, for sharing your time and attention with us.
Awesome. Yeah, appreciate you, Malcolm, and appreciate all of you. Your time is your most valuable resource. Thank you so much for spending it with us tonight.
All right, right on. Okay, well, good night, everybody, and we'll see you all again very soon.
Ciao for now.